Welcome to This Explainer. I'm so glad you're joining me today because we're diving into something that is literally the heartbeat of church leadership, but let's be honest, it often feels incredibly elusive. We're talking about making mature, everyday followers of Jesus. Today, we're going to break down the Clear Path framework. It's a super practical approach designed to help ministry leaders shift gears, moving away from just transferring biblical facts and stepping toward actively facilitating deep, lasting spiritual formation. It's all about making sure our people don't just know a lot of things about Jesus, but that they actually look and live like him. So here's our game plan. We're going to diagnose the discipleship gap, define our core outcomes of knowing, living, and sharing, balance belonging with becoming, map out the pathway of formation, and finally, look at how leadership can unpack and reframe all of this. All right, part 1, the discipleship gap, information versus transformation. Get this, according to the data, fewer than 5% of U.S. churches actually have a reproducing disciple-making culture. Just let that sink in for a second. 5%. And look, it's not because we aren't teaching enough. There is a ton of solid biblical information going out every single Sunday. The real issue is that we're often teaching without forming. We lean so heavily on classes and sermons, but relying on those alone creates a huge gap where information just doesn't automatically equal transformation. To really understand this gap, we have to ask ourselves, are we giving people instructions without giving them the support to actually execute them? Think about it like terrible job training. Have you ever been hired for a new role? Someone hands you a thick manual, expects you to figure it all out completely on your own, and then only checks in to point out your minor mistakes? It's incredibly frustrating, right? Most people just give up. There's this brilliant story from the source material that hits the nail on the head here. The author talks about working as a trainer at Dairy Queen. Corporate headquarters is completely obsessed with that perfect signature curl on top of the ice cream cone. But listen, if you just hand a teenager a manual about the curl and never actually model it for them or help them practice, they're going to fail. In our ministries, we do this all the time. We nitpick the curl. We teach these flawless theological points, but we completely miss building the foundational structure to help people actually practice and grow into mature disciples. And when that clear structure is missing, churches don't just sit perfectly still, they drift. They naturally slide into one of 4 common traps. First, you've got the platform trap. That's all preaching, no practice. Second is the activity illusion, where people are so busy serving they burn out because they don't really have deep roots of belonging. Third is the safety gap, where the community is so cozy and warm that absolutely no one asks the hard questions or challenges each other. And finally, the sending shortcut, where we're so desperate for volunteers that we push people into leadership way before they're actually spiritually formed. When the inevitable storms of life hit, these drifts leave people's foundations incredibly fragile. Moving on to section 2. Know, live, and share, defining the outcomes. Look, before we can even think about building systems or fixing this gap, we have got to clearly define what a mature disciple actually looks like. Because if we don't know the target, we're just going to end up measuring the wrong stuff, like simple attendance or how busy everyone is. Spiritual maturity really breaks down into 3 crystal clear, actionable buckets: knowing the word, living the word, and sharing the word. Knowing is that ongoing, deep familiarity with Jesus that literally rewires how you think. Living, that's the natural response, actual obedience in your day-to-day life. And sharing is just the overflow, pointing others to Jesus both inside the church body and out in your neighborhood. So here is the absolutely crucial contrast. A mature disciple is not defined by checking a box occasionally or by the sheer amount of facts they can memorize. I mean, you can sit in a pew for 3 decades and dominate every Bible trivia game, but that is just information. True maturity? It's marked by ongoing transformation. It's about knowing Jesus so intimately that it completely alters how you live, how you trust, and how you act in those quiet, unseen moments of your week. Which brings us to section 3, belonging versus becoming, the tension of culture. Okay, so we know our outcomes, but what kind of environment actually produces that kind of transformation? Because disciples aren't just formed in a vacuum. It requires intentionally balancing 2 very critical elements. On one side, you have belonging. This is where people feel deeply known, safe, loved, and accepted exactly as they are. But on the other side, you have becoming. That's where people are actively challenged, equipped, and pushed to step up and grow. Real, healthy discipleship happens right smack in the middle of that tension. If your church culture tilts too far in either direction, you're going to hit a wall. Think about it. Too much belonging with no becoming, you end up with a stagnant, overly comfortable social club that never challenges anyone to grow. But too much becoming with no belonging, you get an exhausted, burned-out group of people who are just running on pure performance and pressure. It's simple. Belonging creates safety, becoming creates strength. You absolutely need both to create maturity. Let's jump right into section 4, the pathway of formation, the repeatable loop. Now that we understand the right environment of belonging and becoming, how do we build a concrete, repeatable process that actually changes a life? Well, we use a continuous loop, and it's actually the exact same model Jesus used to train his followers. It is beautifully simple. Jesus gave them truth, he showed them how to live it out, he gave them a chance to practice, and then he sent them out. We aren't looking for a basic linear 6-week class here. We want a continuous loop of formation that goes deeper and deeper every single time someone walks through it. When you consistently move your congregation through these 4 sequential steps, discipleship stops being a random accident. First, they learn. They get the information and figure out how to apply it. Second, they see. They watch leaders embody and model it in real life. Third, they live. They step into guided obedience and get to practice in a completely safe space. And finally, they share. They take ownership and start helping others do the exact same thing. This turns formation into a visible, trackable, and completely repeatable pathway for absolutely everyone in your church. And finally, section 5, unpack and reframe the leadership implementation. So how do you actually lead a church through a massive shift like this? The author breaks it down into 2 crucial stages. The first is to unpack. And honestly, this means having the guts to just hit pause for a second. You have to audit your current reality. Look at your clarity, your actual culture, your pathways, and figure out who is really carrying the weight of the ministry right now. And do it without rushing to fix anything just yet. You're looking for what's actually happening beneath the surface, not what you hope is happening. Are there unwritten rules working against your stated values? You've got to unpack the hard truth before you can even think about changing it. And this, right here, is the ultimate pivot point for leadership. Once you've unpacked reality and the gaps are staring you in the face, like maybe you realize you're doing a whole lot of teaching but offering 0 pathways for practice, you have to systematically shift into a proactive posture. You're moving out of passive awareness and stepping up to actively shape the structure. You are getting ready to build. That brings us to the reframe stage. This is where you roll up your sleeves and actually shape the new framework. You take your vision and you make it mobile, meaning it works just as well on a Tuesday afternoon as it does on Sunday morning. You dial in your culture so belonging and becoming are consistently reinforced everywhere. You build out those specific pathways to learn, see, live, and share. And most importantly, you assign clear ownership. You distribute the burden of discipleship across the entire church body, so it's not all just sitting heavy on the shoulders of the senior staff. I want to leave you with this really profound question to wrap up our explainer today. Ask yourself, if your church disappeared tomorrow, would your surrounding community actually notice a difference? Because if you successfully do this work, if you build a clear, intentional path of formation instead of just a pipeline of information, your people are going to naturally carry the life, the love, and the truth of Jesus into their everyday worlds. They'll become mature disciples who know the word, live the word, and share the word. And honestly, when that happens, it changes absolutely everything. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today, and hey, keep building that clear path.